Good morning and good afternoon. I was checking the registration list shortly before starting this, and I saw that we have researchers based in 20 different countries and 4 continents in total, largely based in Sweden and the US, as to be expected. So we're very delighted to see this interest in Sweden. And I have the pleasure in a few minutes of giving the floor to some excellent Swedish speakers. So I'd like to keep my introductory remarks very brief. Just for some housekeeping comments, you can enable captioning if you'd like to read a live transcription of our remarks, some live captioning. If you have any technical issues, please do let us know in the chat. We're also enabling the Q&A window, so you can use that Q&A function to ask questions throughout the presentation. We'll have about 15 minutes of Q&A after all the speakers have made their presentations. And then in addition to letting us know about any technical issues you might be having in the chat, we also encourage you to share, if you'd like, something like your name, your research field, your city or institution. You're welcome to drop your LinkedIn profile as well, and network with each other during and after this event. So I'd like to first start, before starting my presentation, a live polling feature. I gathered the different speakers and asked what can be very useful just to help tinker and tailor our presentations to better understand our audience. So we're going to ask 2 questions here via polling. One is, where are you located? Where we've simplified some answers is either Sweden, elsewhere in Europe, the United States, Canada, or somewhere else outside of Europe. I'll leave this open just for a minute to hopefully get your live responses. And then in addition to that, we're asking, what is your research or career stage? The EU has defined, for simplification purposes across all of Europe, different research stages. So I have here the sort of titles and descriptions of R1 through R4. And we also understand that a lot of people attending, you may be like me, not a researcher yourself, but supporting researchers, staff in one capacity or another at a university or other institution. So this can help us maybe on the fly give some good examples that'll be more relevant to a majority of the audience. So I'll leave this open. I see a majority of people have already answered. And actually, as I have this open still, I would like to ask our third question, which is not in the form of a poll. So we'd like to ask what you're looking for, both in this webinar and perhaps in the coming days and weeks and months in terms of the next steps for your research career, and what we as speakers for our respective organizations can do to provide tailored content for you. So you're welcome to write out a response that says something as simple as you're looking for initial information while you're considering countries and you're not even set on Sweden, or that you are all set on Sweden and you want to find Swedish partners or have Swedish partners join your international research consortium with your home country, or you may represent your university and want to develop bilateral university ties. Whatever the case may be, as long or as short as you'd like, feel free just to share that in the chat. All the speakers will be monitoring that, and also I will save an archive of the chat afterwards. And perhaps the next few days, I'll go through that saved chat and give some comments, give some individual emails if you'd like to leave your contact information, and I can make sure we follow up with specific information. You should be able to see the results here. Just for everyone's sake, the majority of people, half of the people are in the United States, a quarter are in Sweden, and a small number in Canada, and the rest are either elsewhere in Europe or elsewhere in other continents. In the career stage, I find this pretty interesting, and a nice chunk of R1 and R2, and then almost half of people are other, not necessarily direct researchers themselves. Okay, so I think a lot of people in the audience may have joined because they heard about this through us at EURAXESS. Just a quick reminder for those who aren't familiar. EURAXESS is an official project of the European Union to promote Europe as a research destination and also strengthen transatlantic research ties. In the case of us, my colleague Daria Bitina Karajan and I are based in Washington, D.C., covering all of the US and Canada. Regardless of where you're based in the world, there is generally a EURAXESS hub assigned to you or near you. So the entire EURAXESS Researchers in Motion project is designed to provide information to you as a researcher who's looking to move to Europe or move elsewhere within Europe, or even go from Europe to a different region, such as us in Washington, D.C. We help people apply to bottom-up fellowships and grants and learn how they can have a Canadian or American host institute. And on the European side of EURAXESS, you have within each country a national portal and local EURAXESS service centers. And currently the list is 43 countries. So it's the 27 EU member states and then 16 additional countries that pay into the budget and get access to the European Union's Research Innovation Program. And as a reminder, all of our services are free of charge. If you'd like us to speak at your event or give a presentation tailored to your audience, we're very happy to do that. So just as a very quick overview, I'd like to remind you that the bread and butter of EURAXESS services is the jobs and funding portal. This is where you can find European Union and national level funding opportunities for your institutions. as well as jobs, both within academia and outside of it. So I'll share a screenshot later showing the opportunities I was able to find in Sweden this morning. Next is the partnering tool and hosting. If you're looking to apply to a bottom-up fellowship or grant, this is where you can find European institutes that have expressed their interest in hosting you. So for example, I'll show you how you can find institutions in Sweden and take some of your portable funding with you there. We're constantly offering career development tools through webinars and other features like that. And then information assistance. So I mentioned those EURAXESS service centers on the ground in each European country, and then the national portals, which are those overarching websites that cover an entire country's research landscape. So for all of you in the US and Canada, we at EURAXESS North America are here to serve you. And then this is a list of the other hubs covering the majority of the world. And then of course, any country-specific questions you have regarding Europe, you can always contact EURAXESS presence in that country. So the EURAXESS national portal and the different service centers. Any questions, you can contact Gary and I, North America at EURAXESS.net, or on social media at our different channels, and we'll be very happy to get back to you and point you in the right direction. So just as a quick visual overview here, I was able to take the 11,000 jobs that show up on the EURAXESS jobs portal right now. And the only filter I did is I clicked the Swedish, I clicked Sweden as the country box, and then it whittled it down to a little under 500 current job opportunities. These are all centrally monitored to prevent spam and sort of fake postings or malicious material. So everything you see there has been approved centrally by Brussels, but it is open for others to post. So there's an administrative period. So if you are looking to hire, regardless of where you're based, you can add to the EURAXESS jobs portal. I mentioned before, there are not just the 27 EU member states, but also additional countries that pay into the budget and are part of this, this research scheme. Here's a list of those countries, and I will be promoting EURAXESS Sweden in a bit. So if you go to the EURAXESS homepage, click Find Your Country. This is where you can find Sweden or any other country and get in touch with the national experts. And for the most part, these 43 different national portals all have the same overarching 18 topics where they provide expertise. So whether you're a Swede who's been abroad, whether you're an American looking to go to Sweden for the first time, you may even be from a neighboring country to Sweden and just moving a few kilometers over the border. These 18 different topics are all areas where the local experts will provide you free information. And this is all because of the European Union's primary goal of helping researcher mobility and removing the friction from moving from one country to another, regardless if it's within Europe or from the United States or Canada to Europe, for example. If you found your way here through our flash notes, you're already a member of EURAXESS. If you go to northamerica.euraxess.org, which my colleague will drop in the chat in just a moment, or you can click this big yellow button here and sign up for our emails. We call these flash notes. We send them twice a month, and we have a small number of events, news, research-related news on the European Union, and funding opportunities. I'd like to give a quick remark here on Horizon Europe. So the European Union funds research and innovation on a 7-year basis. The current period we're in started at the beginning of 2021 and it ends throughout 2027. There's 95.5 billion euro assigned for all of these different topics you see here. They're divided into pillars. For the most part, we promote pillars 1 and 2. Pillar 1 for this quick overview is bottom-up funding, generally for individual researchers. So you see these European Research Council grants, these Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions Fellowships. In total, there's 29 billion euro over the 7 years towards these programs. In Pillar 2, you have these 6 different clusters. These are the thematic clustering of these top-down calls for international research consortia. There is 53.5 billion euro in these 6 clusters. Right now, you can find any calls that are for the 2023-2024 period. We're very happy to point you to past webinars. We'll be hosting webinars in the coming months on Pillar 2. And if you are based in the United States or Canada, the way these 2 countries are currently identified by the European Commission is as high income countries, meaning you can bring your own funding, but you're not automatically eligible for funding as an American institution or Canadian institution joining an international consortium. However, I do want to highlight that if you are in the health field, the health cluster is exceptionally eligible. So if you are with a US research group looking to join an international consortium with European partners, and you're in the field of health, you are eligible for EU funding if your consortium is selected. So I want to make that small nuanced point just to highlight. We're always happy to give tailored presentations to these. And actually our partners that I'll be mentioning in a moment will be giving a Pillar 1 Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions Fellowship webinar on May 4th. So if you mark your calendars, I'll share a link in the chat to that as well. So please contact us here at the email address you see on your screen. And then we have on these social media channels here. If you just search EURAXESS North America, you'll find us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And again, if you sign up for our flash notes, you'll get those twice a month. I'd like to leave you with two quick resources in addition to the great speakers you'll hear from today. One is the Swedish Transatlantic Researchers and Scholars Network. They regularly share information on opportunities in Sweden. They hold networking fika meetings on Zoom to connect members throughout the US and Canada. They have a great internal discussion board and much more. So please do reach out to the STARS Network. They are the ones that are hosting that May 4th webinar on the MSCA fellowships. And for example, I was mentioning before EURAXESS Sweden. This is where you can get in touch with them, find all the opportunities in Sweden. And if you type in Sweden on the EURAXESS jobs portal, you can filter and find not just jobs, but then host institutes. So here's an example of 10 different institutions looking to host you if you bring your portable funding with you. So go to euraxess.se for all of the Sweden-specific EURAXESS information. So I think if you want to scan and sign up for our flash notes, you can do that quickly here. Other than that, I will leave a link in the chat. We're very privileged to be able to support you in your research career, regardless of where you're based or where you're looking to go to. We generally cover the US and Canada, but we always are happy to receive and direct any questions you might have. So I'll thank you, and I'll end my presentation here. And I now have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Maria Brogren. She is the Counselor for Science, Innovation, and Higher Education at the Embassy of Sweden to the United States here in Washington, D.C. Dr. Brogren, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jackson, and thank you so much for that introduction to EURAXESS and to all the resources that are available. So I will give an introduction to Sweden, and then we will have other speakers also digging more into the details. So yeah, welcome everyone. Now I will share a presentation. Yes. And if there's a problem, please tell me, because now I don't see you. So before, yeah, very good. So before sort of going into the Swedish research system, I will give you some basics about Sweden, because that's also, of course, an important component if you're considering moving to Sweden for your further research career. So in Sweden, we are about 10.2, 10.3 million people on an area slightly larger than California. And Sweden is almost 2/3 covered by forest, and also a large part, it consists of lakes and rivers. And we are very fond of our nature, and we have ambitious climate goals and environmental regulation in place. Today, 95% of our electricity production is fossil-free, and we are also very much into recycling, and 95% of household waste is recycled. And that is important to all Swedes, and we are taught from very early age to contribute in this way. And we also have the right of public access, which is very fond to Swedes. This means that we can access forest and land as long as we don't disturb wildlife or destroy anything. So, I mean, we can go on private land, we can pick blueberries, for example, and this is, of course, very highly valued. Sweden is also the home to the inventor Alfred Nobel and the Nobel Prize. And every year on the 10th of December, prizes are given to distinguished researchers in different fields, for example, in physics and medicine. And there's also a literature prize and a peace prize. And I would like to say that Sweden is sort of characterized by creativity, sustainability, and collaboration. And I've illustrated this here with that we are very early adopters. We love to try new products. For example, an electric motorbike here by a Swedish company named Cake. Spotify is a Swedish company, and we're also very much into music, fashion, design, and gaming. And in food and ag tech, we have innovative companies contributing to sustainability by, for example, vegan products like here made from fungi. So creativity, sustainability, and collaboration. And we are often very high up in the rankings when it comes to innovation. We are number 1 in Europe when it comes to innovation and number 3 in the world, or I should say in the European Union, because Sweden, Switzerland, and the US are the top 3 in the world right now when it comes to innovation. And Sweden spends a lot on R&D, 3.5%, which is slightly higher than the US. Here are some Swedish companies. Some are funded way back in the time of Alfred Nobel and have now become large global corporations, and some are newer unicorns like Spotify and Klarna, for example, and King, that makes games. And we have already mentioned the fika, and fika is really important to Swedes. And Sweden is the second largest coffee drinking country next to after Finland. And we also like to combine coffee with some sweet things like cinnamon buns. So fika is important. And you might also, if you're considering moving to Sweden, you might also want to know that in principle, everyone speaks English, and we like to do it. We like to practice our English. So the language will not be a problem. And even more so at universities, it's very globalized. Sweden is very globalized. Yes, so now I will move to sort of my office, Sweden's Offices of Science and Innovation, and what we are and what we do, because we are a resource also. And Sweden has this kind of office for promoting collaboration in science, innovation, and higher education in 7 countries around the world. And we are coordinated by an office in Stockholm. And in the US office, we are 3 persons right now. So it's me and it's my colleague Jenny Maidar, and it's our associate Ossian Johnson. And our objective is to increase collaboration between Sweden and the US in innovation, science, and higher education, as I said. And we also want to learn from R&D policy and implementation in the US to see how Sweden can improve our system even further. And a third goal is to attract R&D investments and also R&D competence to Sweden. And that's why I mean, this webinar is so spot on for our mission. And we have, as I said, these 3 areas, and we also cover the entire US. So it's very broad scope. So we like to narrow it down a little bit by pointing at prioritized areas, and these are very well reflected in, I mean, these are the priorities of the Swedish government in this field. So it's life science, digitalization, and green transition. And I will mention those a little bit more later on. And of course, in these fields, we also focus on, for example, cancer research. In the US, Biden has revitalized the cancer moonshot, and we are right now negotiating and implementing arrangement on how to deepen the collaboration on cancer. Another implementing arrangement that is a sort of research like an MOU is negotiated in the field of basic energy research, and that intends to provide easier access to research facilities, for example, the 17 US national research labs and the research infrastructure in Sweden that Lena will tell you more about a little bit later. Quantum technology is another area where we have also ongoing collaboration. Critical minerals is another interesting area, which is sort of in the combination of digitalization and green transition, because these minerals are needed for everything in principle that needs to be done to do this transition. Space research is another area that we have discussions on furthering, deepening the collaboration. And then also Jackson told me that it might be interesting for you to know how one can end up in a job like this, promoting research collaboration. So I will just show you some sort of bits and pieces of my background. So I did my master's degree at Uppsala University, and in Sweden we do a master's thesis in the end. So we are sort of focusing for one semester on a certain topic. And I had the privilege to go to Los Alamos National Lab in New Mexico to study transmutation of nuclear waste. And that was actually sort of the first spark that has now led to why I'm here. So I was very inspired by that. But I still liked Uppsala a bit better. So I moved back and did my PhD on solar energy at Uppsala University. Then I started working at the Swedish Energy Agency with funding of research in renewable energy. Then I moved to the government offices in Sweden to sort of steer the research funding at the Swedish Energy Agency. Then I worked for a while at the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences, which is like an NGO that is promoting engineering sciences. And during that time, I spent a couple of months in Brussels, researching how Sweden could be better at taking advantage of the European programs in some fields. This was during the 6th framework program, I think, so it's many years ago. And then I moved back to the government offices for a while. Then I thought that maybe I need to work for the private sector. So I moved to the Swedish Construction Federation, which is like a lobby organization for construction companies in Sweden. And there I took on the role as director for environment and sustainability to try and move the entire construction sector in a more sustainable way. And now they are actually on their way and quite progressive in the field of reducing climate impact from construction, not only from energy use in buildings, but also from construction materials. Then I worked at WSP, which is a global consultancy company, and I was the director for sustainability and innovation. And this has led me to this position, which I applied for. It was an open ad. So I applied for it, and now I am working at the Embassy of Sweden since August 2021. And this is, I mean, I have had a lot of very fun jobs, but I think this is the top so far. I really love being this sort of broker of collaboration. Yes, and now some words on research in Sweden. And I have illustrated this by the oldest Swedish university. It's Uppsala University. It was founded in 1477. And the newest Swedish university is Mälardalen University, which received the status of a university in 2021. They had been a university college before, but now they have a full university status. And we have around 37 universities all over Sweden. In some cities, there are several universities, such as Stockholm. I think they have 4, 5, 6 maybe, from rather small specialized universities to Stockholm University. And here are some of the top universities in Sweden from specialized, like Karolinska Institutet, which is a medical university, KTH, which is a sort of more of an engineering university, SLU is a Swedish agricultural university, and so on. So there is a wide range. Also connected to universities, we have a lot of incubators and science park in order to commercialize innovations from universities. And it might also be interesting for you to know that Stockholm is second only to Silicon Valley when it comes to producing the highest number of unicorns per capita. And we have a lot of patents, and also a sort of specific detail or feature of Sweden is that we have something called the teacher's exemption, which means that teachers, or rather researchers, it's called the teacher's exemption, but it's researchers at Swedish universities, they own their own inventions. So it's not owned by the university. And this means, of course, larger freedom to do what you want with your research results. And some areas that we focus on These are the same areas that as I mentioned earlier: green transition, life sciences, and digitalization, and illustrated, for example, by Northvolt's huge battery factory that they are building in the northern part of Sweden. And I just want to mention for you, those of you who might be interested in PhD studies in Sweden. In Sweden, a PhD is 4 years usually. It entails research courses and also teaching. And PhD positions at Swedish universities, they are paid positions. So you have a salary and you have all the sort of things that comes with a paid position, such as, holidays and the right to parental leave and so on. And there are no fees for PhD students. And you're really a part of the faculty or the research group at the university. So you have a good status, I would say. And also to finish off sort of some more details on this, work-life balance. It's extremely important in Sweden, and we have a very strong welfare system paid for by taxes. We have high taxes, but what you get is really a safety net. For example, subsidized healthcare and so on. And there's extensive vacation for everyone, a minimum 5 weeks per year. Most have more. And there is also an extensive parental leave that can be equally split by both parents. So very, very flexible. A very affordable childcare, also paid for by tax money, and there's only a small fee for the parents, a very small fee. And also Sweden has the highest employment rates for women in Europe. And altogether, I believe that this is actually a large contributor to the innovative, the success in innovation in Sweden, because you can afford to fail. And also, this also means that, for example, women is very included in the workforce, and we have a large diversity. So I will end there, and then I'm happy to take questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brogren. I think with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Lena Renner of the Swedish Research Council. Dr. Renner, I will let you know if there's any technical issues, but with that, you can take it away.
Thank you, Jackson, and thanks, Maria, for the nice introduction to Sweden. I came to Sweden actually to do my PhD 12 years ago, so I'm not originally from Sweden. And I can agree that it's a great country for doing a PhD and even work life afterwards. I just started sharing. Now I think you can see what I want you to see. Yes, I'm at the Swedish Research Council, and I want to give you an overview over the Swedish research system, as starting with what the Swedish Research Council does. I'm working at the International Secretariat at the Swedish Research Council, and I have a special responsibility for Japan, UK, and the US. So I've met Maria quite a few times already, digital so far. Well, the Swedish Research Council is the largest governmental research funding body for Swedish university colleges and institutes. It's about 10% that we fund the research activities at the universities. And the most important thing that we fund is actually researcher-initiated basic research of highest scientific quality. So our largest call is a bottom-up call. We have quite a other missions from our government, like research communication. We promote international collaborative research, but we also analyze the conditions of the research system, evaluate research, and give the government advice on future research policy. We also work to ensure that researchers gain access to advanced research infrastructures, and we initiate and support strategic initiatives in research. And with all that, of course, we work for an efficient research system. But we're not alone in the Swedish research system. We have kind of brothers and sisters underneath other ministries, as you can see here in these pictures. The Ministry of Climate and Enterprise, for example, has 3 research funders or Swedish agencies. The Swedish Energy Agency, where Maria worked before, is not only a research council, but Vinnova and Formas do so. And Vinnova is our research agency or research council for innovation, and Formas is the government research council for sustainable development. And their areas include also agriculture sciences and spatial planning. Then we have, we usually say our little brother because it's the smallest one, Forte, underneath the Ministry of Health and Social Affairs. And this is the Swedish Research Council for Health, Working Life and Welfare. So if you say, oh, the Swedish Research Council, then we're sometimes mixed up actually with Forte, as their English name is the Swedish Research Council for Health, Working Life and Welfare. So we are Vetenskapsrådet, Swedish Research Council, and then there is also Forte. But not enough with that. It's some people think it's quite complicated here in Sweden with all our research councils. We have other agencies, governmental agencies that are important for the higher education system, and I just want to mention them. For example, the Swedish Council for Higher Education or the Swedish Higher Education Authority, and other ministries like the Swedish Institute, who are important players in the Swedish research landscape. And Sweden has, of course, also private foundations which offer research scholarships, for example. And I just want to mention here STINT, as STINT has quite an international profile, but there's also Wallenberg Foundation, which offers programs for researchers to come to Sweden. When you think of, oh, wow, which should I choose? I'm a researcher, I don't know so much about all these agencies. Then I think this pictures might help you, as it covers the which themes each research council is supporting or funding, and how it is on a line of applied science and basic science. So these agencies together cover a large part of the Swedish research innovation ecosystem, from basic research initiated by researchers themselves to needs-driven research and implementation. And of course, we all do that in order to create impact as well as innovation. The Swedish Research Council and Vinnova is involved in almost all disciplines and areas, while Forte, you see it on the top, and Formas and the Swedish Energy Agency have more thematic research areas they support. So you should think of where you are in these pictures, and then go to this website of this of the research agencies to look up the calls. But you can see the Swedish Research Council, as I said also in my first slide, is the biggest one. We fund most of the research money. That's why I go also into how we work with our calls. In the beginning of the year, we usually have a period where all of our calls open. Our largest call, as I mentioned, is completely bottom up. And this means as a researcher, you come up with the research idea. The condition for applying is that you have a PhD in general. For all of our courses, actually, that you have a PhD and a Swedish host institution who will support you and employ you in case the application is selected for funding. So you don't need an employment at a Swedish host institution when applying. You just need a Swedish host institution promising that they will employ you in case you get funded, when you are rewarded. Usually we receive 6,000 applications per year, more or less, and we have 90 review panels and 900 review panel members. That means also that we already start kind of to think of our calls in 2024. Our largest call the bottom up one is always there. But there are also certain directed calls opening up every second year, but it's all on our website. You can see that mostly during summer or from April until fall, we do the assessment. We have a quite decent process around that. It's very efficient and clearly defined, and it's very transparent. So there is on our website, you can check information on the guiding questions for the reviewers, how your project is evaluated. You can also see who sits in the panel. That means which might, the persons who will discuss your research application, and so on. So you can usually get a positive response that we are so transparent and efficient in our processes. Oh, next picture here. There was a little hiccup. In 2022, the Swedish Research Council distributed 8.1 billion crowns in support for mainly basic research in all scientific fields and for research infrastructure. And the largest part of the research support goes to projects that have been proposed by the researchers themselves. But as you can see in this picture, the red one, we give quite a lot of money also to research infrastructures. And in the next slide, you will see which research infrastructures cost quite a lot. But research infrastructures in general include facilities, calculation tools, data networks, and databases of high quality. In 2022, we had 40 calls for grants, and almost 1,000 were granted, 999. Here is my promised pictures about the research infrastructures, and it's something that we are quite proud of here in Sweden because we have ESS. It's the largest research infrastructure investment in Sweden, and we host it together with Denmark. And it's the world's most powerful neutron source, which is situated in Lund in southern Sweden. It's under construction right now, but the first users are expected in 2027. And if you think of our call calendar, that we open up most of our calls in the beginning of the year, you might think of already now, oh, I might have a research project idea. I can apply next year, and then you will start the year after that, and you might be able to use ESS. Next to ESS, we have actually the MAX4, and it's a laboratory for accelerated physics and research using synchrotron light, and it's the world's brightest synchrotron light facility. And it's part of a national research infrastructure and part of Lund University. And as I said, it's next to ESS. So these are quite close together. There's also a conference on research infrastructures in June in Lund, where you can look at ESS and MAX4. Then we also have Science for Life Laboratory, the SciLife Lab. It's a Swedish National Scientific Center for large-scale research in life sciences, medicine, and the environment. It started actually in 2010 by 4 universities, 3 of them in Stockholm, as Maria mentioned, that we have quite many here in Stockholm, but it's Karolinska Institute, the medical university here in Stockholm, the Royal Institute of Technology, also known as KTH, Stockholm University, and then Uppsala University, which is close to Stockholm if you compare it to the whole Sweden. But in 2013, SciLife Lab was designated as a national research infrastructure, and today SciLife Lab operates at most major Swedish universities. That means that you can use the facilities without any extra cost. You only pay the suspenses. You know, is suspenses the right word? That you paid for paper or something. You know, those materials that you use, but not the facility. I hope it makes sense. Otherwise, you can ask me later, or write it in the chat. We have NICE, that's a national research infrastructure for supercomputers and large-scale calculation in Sweden. And it actually started this year in 2023 and is hosted by Linköping University or Linköping University, you would find it there. And it actually got funded by the SRC for 2023 and 2026. And then up in the north, if you have ESS and MAX4 in south Sweden, we have in the north ISCAT. And ISCAT is in ionospheric and atmospheric measurement with radars, and it measures the effects of the northern lights. And we are hosts together with Norway. And all facilities are located north of the Arctic Cycle in Sweden, Norway, and Finland. I think Maria had a nice picture of the landscape. There was also a little red dotted line where the Arctic Circle is, so it's all north of it. And there's another ASCAT 3D that will be an international research infrastructure, and it is currently under construction. So who knows, when you apply and you will get it, maybe ASCAT 3D is also already available. I want to show you another picture on why Sweden, or what is Sweden especially good at. And one measurement you can look at in kind of research. Maria showed you why it's quite a good country for living, but I want to also show this. I want to show you these pictures to get that you get a sense of how good we are in research. So this picture shows the proportion of highly cited publications within different research areas for Sweden and the EU and the world. So it's the citation impact, and in general, Sweden ranks as number 13 in the world. We want to be better, of course, and that's why we need you, I would say. But we have especially high citation impact in biology, in agriculture, in geosciences, in physics, in biomedicine, clinical medicine, and the humanities. So these are areas right now where we are especially good, but you can also see that we are not too bad in all the other areas. And when it comes to publication, usually in most research fields, you don't publish on your own, you use your friends, and you have friends with you. And that's why I want to show you this picture as our co-authored publications. We are already friends with USA and Canada. USA is the country where we co-publish, or we have the most co-authored publications. And that's what I wanted to share with you. I think that Christer, you want to introduce him, but I think he will give you an overview of more university collaborations that are already existing. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Renner. And I will give a reminder to the audience that all of the speakers have kindly agreed to share their presentations with us at EURAXESS North America. So most likely tomorrow, everyone will be getting an automated follow-up email from Zoom with which you registered, and we will include a link to the event page you registered at initially, and that will include a recording, the video recording of this webinar, as well as everyone's presentation in PDF format. I'm going to double check our speaker list to make sure I go in the right order here, and I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Philippe Tassin of the Young Academy of Sweden. Let me welcome you to the stage, Professor Tassin. Thank you. And I will spotlight you for the audience.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for the introduction. My name, as you said, is Philippe Tassin. I'm a professor of physics at Chalmers, but here today I'm in my capacity as a member of the Young Academy of Sweden. We are a large society of about 40 young researchers and faculty members that are working on a number of different things. We're working on research politics, trying to influence things so we get better conditions in Sweden. We're working also a lot with internationalization, and then we're working also a lot with outreach, mostly to younger people. And one of the things that we have done a few months ago, half a year ago, published, is that we wrote a beginner's guide to Swedish academia. And you might wonder why did we write that guide? Well, for people who have traveled around, then you probably have encountered the problem that university environments have a lot of unwritten rules and traditions. There's a lot of written rules also, but there's a lot of things that are not really written down or not easy to find in a single place. And that makes it quite hard, and this is hard to find out for newcomers in the system, and it also makes it hard for newcomers in the system. And this is not something where Sweden especially sticks out, or so. I think this is just the case everywhere. Myself, I've been working in Greece, and I've been working in the US. I've been in Iowa, in Sweden, Belgium, and this is every time you move, you encounter the same problem. For example, also in the Netherlands, our colleagues, the Young Academy of the Netherlands, they first wrote a beginner's guide to Dutch academia, and then a few years ago we thought, like, well, that's really a good idea. We should also do this for Sweden. So our beginner's guide to Swedish academia, and I will give you the link to the beginner's guide at the end of the presentation, is aimed mostly, I would say, to senior postdocs, tenure track faculty, but there is a lot of useful information for everyone in there. I had even sort of very established colleagues here at Chalmers who got a guide and said, like, oh, I'm working here 20 years and finally I figured out this specific thing here. We have been trying to write down these informal rules and traditions that are specific to Sweden, and where Sweden differs a little bit from other countries, but we have tried not to be so specific that it only applies to a particular university, and so it doesn't have very local traditions. This is something you will have to figure out at the university. But as long as it sort of covers the whole of Sweden, we have tried to incorporate it in our beginner's guide. Now, let me give you a small overview of what's in there. I don't have the time to go to all the details, but I tell you about the different chapters, and we start with Swedish academia in a nutshell. If you don't have the time to read the entire book, and it's not really very thick or so, then read the first chapter because it has the most important things, such as an overview of the university, and we have covered that already previously. But there's about 38 to 40 universities and university colleges. What you also find in this chapter is the type of academic positions that you can get in Sweden. Tenured positions, tenure track positions, but also temporary positions, and funding, so that goes with it. For example, important to know is that if you get a faculty position in Sweden, that doesn't mean you get funding for that position. So you might need to get external funding to pay for that position. In general, if we look at academic positions, there's sort of three types of positions. There's what we call statutory positions. So these are defined in law. That means professor positions, something we call lector, which is like an associate professor or a senior lecturer position. And then there is a position that we call biträdande universitetslektor, and this is a tenure track position. But otherwise, positions are often derived from collective bargaining agreements, and there the university have a lot of flexibility and freedom, and so the type of positions other positions that you find depends a lot on the specific university. That brings us to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is about governance of higher education and research. Who sets the agenda? Who decides policies? What type of research is available? And then the Swedish government is a very important actor there. Swedish parliament and government exert a lot of power in the governance of higher education and research. And they do that with legislation, but they do that also by attaching conditions to when they give money to universities. It's also important to know that nearly all universities actually are government agencies in Sweden, which is quite exceptional, I think. Just with a few exceptions, Chalmers, Jönköping, Handelshögskolan in Stockholm. Funding is also very important for individual research. Where do you find funding for your research project? And then good to know is that there's a lot of funding at companies. 70% of research is being done at companies. But then if we look at funding for universities, we have this chart here where you see the different contributions, and then you see that there's a lot of money coming in from direct government funding to the universities. We have the research councils, which my colleague from the Swedish Research Council has already explained a lot about. And then there's smaller contributions from municipalities and so on. And then on the top we have about 5% research funding from the European Union. Private foundations also have funding, and also companies sometimes invest money in research at universities. That brings us to chapter 3. Another important thing that we do at universities is teaching, of course. And in chapter 3, you find a lot of information on how does university teaching work, how does admission to the university work, what type of programs we have. We have undergraduate programs, first cycle, second cycle, and then we have PhD programs and something that we called licentiate degree. And I don't have the time really here to explain what that is, but you can read it in our beginner's guide. And of course, we have PhD studies, and this may be the most relevant for many people. So we have really used a lot of space about PhD studying, funding requirements, teaching, and so on. Now, from an instructor's perspective, there's different grading systems that we explain. That you need teaching experience, pedagogical qualifications are very important for promotion at Swedish University. But here there's a lot that is hard to describe because it's university specific. So we always recommend, if you come to Sweden, do an interview or you get an offer of employment, talk about your teaching assignment with the university representatives. External funding is, of course, very important. So we give information about funding agencies and grant schemes, budget issues, indirect costs, also about ethical review and some practical information and advice. And then we have chapter 5. Chapter 5 is about right benefits and practical information. And so here you find a lot of things that maybe are not very specific to the universities, but that anyway sort of are important when you work at a university. Employee rights and benefits, salaries, how are salaries set, how do you negotiate about your salary, social insurance, family support, gender equality, and just a lot of practical information. For example, visas, residence permits, personal identity number, which is something like a social security number in the US. How do you get a bank account? So just a lot of practical information for people who arrive at Sweden. And then in the last chapter, we cover aspects about language, the use of Swedish language at universities. I know that in a previous slide, it was said that sort of you can come here and everything will work in English. But I would say that it's actually quite important to also learn Swedish, particularly if you aspire and permanent position in Sweden. And then there's information then on how can you learn Swedish, and sort of in general we share in that chapter some strategies how to understand Swedish academia. So talk to colleagues and a lot of obvious things, but we write them down in our beginner's guide. And that's a short overview of the guide. And sort of you can find our beginner's guide to Swedish academia on our website, and you find a link on my slides.
Thank you so much, Professor Tessin. We've already been receiving some accolades for the guide in the chat, so I think people will be very excited to get the link and start reading it. With that, I will turn to the final speaker of the event before we open the Q&A. I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Christer Bergman, Program Manager at SIREUS. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackson. I hope that you all could see the my slide. So once again, thank you, EURAXESS Jackson, and also certainly Maria from the embassy to invite us, SIREUS. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes on what is SIREUS. First thing is called SIREUS, and as we spoke with Jackson a couple of days ago, it's not SIREUS, it's SIREUS. It stands for Students, Innovators, Researchers, Entrepreneurs between US and Sweden. And it is a program within SAC USA. SAC is the Swedish American Chamber of Commerce, and we have 19 chapters out in the US, and we use them at SIREUS program. We use them to be closer to business out there and closer to universities. So we are not very old. We started, in fact, a year ago, and it was on February 15th. We work with Swedish Embassy, and particularly Maria and her colleagues, and also the Ambassador Olofsdotter has been very, very instrumental to launch this. The SI, Swedish Institute, is also behind, and also the, as I said, Swedish American Chamber of Commerce. What we are doing is that we started a project because there was a need from the Swedish universities to get together in a network to work with different areas. And one certain areas for this, for participants here is we try to increase the number of students, trainees, and researchers between Sweden and US. So that's the bridge in between, and also strengthen the collaboration for projects with research and innovation. So those are the key things we are doing. These are the universities, and you've seen a couple of logos before. Chalmers in Gothenburg and University of Gothenburg, Karolinska is there, KTH, Jönköping, Linköping, Linné, Luleå, North, Lund University that we heard about, ESS and Max 4, Mitt University, which is middle of Sweden, Mälardalen was also mentioned before, Stockholm, and certainly Uppsala University. These 13 members are funding the project. We got limited funds from the government, so to speak, from KK Stiftelsen and Vinnova, but these universities fund the 3-year program. These universities, there's a map to the left, you see, and that was shared before by Lena and I think Maria. So we have a matrix saying these are the disciplines that you could come visit the Swedish universities. And it was also mentioned before that the English for all master's classes and up, all the Swedish university requires to have that in English. The bachelor level is not required, but a number of universities do have one or more courses or tracks in English. One of the things that SIREUS that we are doing, we're based in DC. We have 4 trainees at the J1 visa that is helping us. Those trainees are coming from the Swedish participating universities. One of the things we did early on was to say, okay, so this is a map over established student bilateral exchange agreements. So at this moment in January, we had 265 agreements between Swedish universities and American universities. So it's just give you a view that, in fact, we are not starting from scratch. There's a lot of activity between Sweden and US when it comes to student exchange. Could be short and longer term. The next step we are doing right now is that we are looking into different thematic areas, which is the key to attract researchers. These are the preliminary, we're just in the process, but I choose to share it with you anyway. There might be 1 or 2 more coming. But the whole idea is that now we're going to focus on on workshops, reach out to researchers in specific areas. And there will be very soon on our website also a more information about those thematic areas. But our philosophy and goal, short-term goals, is to have a similar map to the exchange of student exchange programs to somehow in the research. I do know that that's a big task, and I saw some before about the published document. That might be one, but at least to try to say who are Swedish universities working with and how many do we have, how intensive is it? And we are trying to expand. SIREUS is doing program events, seminars in order to expand that collaboration. Here's the status. So we started, and it's called Students, Innovators, Research, Entrepreneurs between US and Sweden. We started in February last year. We had a website, sireus.org. Please visit us. May last year, less than a year ago. And immediately we got a lot of requests from American universities. So this is really cool. How can we be part of it? So I'm going to have one slide explaining what we want to do with and what we are doing with American affiliate universities. So we do have the, 13 Swedish universities network. We will expand that as well, but right now we have 13. And then we are building up a network of American universities. We have had a lot of events over the last 6 to 9 months, and that would continue, both real life and also webinar event. So this is what we are talking with the American universities. So they also, we use an MOU with the American universities, and the question there we ask is that, are you willing to participate in a balanced student and research exchange with a Swedish university? Are you willing to host a workshop in a certain thematic area? Are you willing to participate? Your research is going to Sweden to participate. Are you willing to have academic delegation coming to Sweden to see how can we work tighter together? One such example is that we have, in a month from now, we have one of our affiliate universities, University of Texas San Antonio. They have 10 people coming to Jönköping, Gothenburg, and Chalmers. So things are starting to move in that direction. The next step after the affiliate universities, we have intention to do affiliate industries, because it was said here before, I think Lena also said it, that a lot of research money is coming also from companies. So we are trying to see how can we get companies, companies that are in need of specific research. Can we do industry doctorandum? Can we do internship from a master's level? So we are trying to help that bridge, that the things are starting to work together. My last slide is, yes, these are the companies we have signed so far as American universities. The Michigan Tech up in Upper Peninsula, Gustavus in Minneapolis, University of Texas San Antonio, Chapman, California, Tufts to Boston, Dakota State. Dakota State is very close with AI Sweden, very high end in the artificial intelligence. Purdue University, Virginia Tech, and Washington State University. And we are working on another 6 or 8 right now as we speak, because they really like the Swedish universities, the openness, and they really want to see how can we explore Sweden more. Jackson, that's all I had because I want to keep it short. So I'm going to stop sharing, but I'm still here if there's any questions and any addition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will encourage everyone in the audience to share their questions via the Q&A box. We have been, I have been monitoring the chat a bit, but for all of the presenters, they'll be able to see the questions. And then also as an attendee, you'll be able to give thumbs up to questions that you find relevant. So if we get a big rush of questions, we'll be able to address the most popular ones right away. As of now, I don't see any. I think hopefully it sounds like the presentations have been very in-depth and that may have preempted some of the questions here. I'm going to quickly review the questions submitted during registration to see if there is something I can ask that may not have been answered, or perhaps the opportunity to elaborate on. So there was a question that perhaps Professor Tassin, you had addressed, but if you want to give any additional remarks, someone asks, beyond PhD and postdoctoral scholarships, what are the resources available for postdoc, early career foreign researchers who wish to establish themselves longer term in Sweden? So this is open for anyone. I perhaps just suggest if you have any additional remarks, and I'll leave the floor to you.
Yeah, yeah. And Sweden is going to a transition right now. So postdoc, then I'm thinking about tenure track positions. And this is something that the Swedish government has introduced a few years ago. It's called this biträdande universitetslektor, which is a tenure track assistant professor. And more universities are now using and opening these positions. So postdoc, that's the position, sort of positions you have to look for, assistant professor, tenure track positions.
Thank you very much. If anyone else wants to complement that, I invite you just to unmute yourself and jump right in. Other than that, I'm keeping my eye on the Q&A box here. And what we'll do is I'll just interject to say, I think all of the speakers have agreed to make their presentations available. And then we at EURAXESS North America are very happy to act as an initial point of contact, forwarding concerns as relevant to the appropriate people. And then if the speakers have put a contact information slide at the end of their presentation, I would take that as encouragement to follow up with them directly. But I know different people are in different roles and have different amounts of time they can dedicate to sort of questions like that. So I don't want to presume on anyone's behalf, but they can definitely start a conversation in that sense. So I have some questions here. I'll invite all the speakers maybe just to look at your own Q&A box and see if you'd like to volunteer yourselves here. I'm also going to look in the chat.
Well, I can answer about the investments. I have questions about the investments in Sweden. And that depends on what kind of investments. For example, you are very welcome to contact me if it's investments in research. If it's investments in general or in a production facility, for example, it's more suitable to talk to Business Sweden. But of course, we can also forward that question and those contacts. And in general, it's the head of the trade department at the embassy who is sort of the head of business promotion. So Björn Arvidsson is the head of the economic affairs department.
I will read a question here. Someone asks about historically Black colleges and universities and if there has been outreach to these universities in the US. I will say, not representing Sweden, of course, myself, but on behalf of the European Union project, our job, now that the pandemic, we can say, is calming down, is to engage in in-person outreach and travel throughout the US and Canada to promote European funding opportunities and transatlantic research cooperation and research mobility. And with us being based in Washington, D.C., we do have a priority to make it an outreach to local HBCUs. So in the near future, if anyone wants to serve as a point of contact on that, I'm very happy to start a conversation. And then regardless of that is on our list of planned outreach in the future. And I think the question about who at the embassy one can connect with, I think Dr. Brogren addressed that both for research related investment, but then also the trade office within the embassy. And thank you to Mr. Brown. I will be happy to start a conversation. Feel free to contact us as well at the email address on our slide. So I will, perhaps Dr. Brogren, while we wait for additional questions that people might be thinking of, if you want to make a comment on if for EU Open House for our audience that might be in the Washington, D.C. area, is your embassy opening its doors a few weeks from now to the public?
Yes, of course. So most of the EU embassies here in Washington, D.C. will be open. And with sort of full staff available for discussions. So you're all very welcome. And we can, I suggest that we also give some details on that in the email tomorrow.
Absolutely. So I'll connect with you. We'll put that out. You can mark your calendars. If you're in the Washington, D.C. area, Saturday, May 13th is when I believe all 27 EU member state embassies will open their doors along with the European Union delegation, all in Washington, D.C. And if I'm not mistaken, the Saturday prior, many other non-European Union member state embassies will also open their doors to the public, not every single country's embassy. So it's a great way if you're in the D.C. area to experience the culture of maybe half of the embassies in the entire city participate in this. Someone asks about Swedish grants that Swedes abroad can apply for and good strategies to be aware of these and to learn about them and apply. And if these applications or proposals always have to be made together with Swedish institutions. I'm not sure if for Dr. Renner, that may be a question for you.
That's a question for you. I can talk about our grants that we have, and our grants are always connected to a Swedish host institution. So that's where you have to start to look in which university or, well, there are also other organizations that we can support you want to go to, or which is quite good in your research topic, and get in touch with the institution there and say that I want to prepare a proposal and send it to VR, for example. So it's always in connection with the Swedish host institution for our grants at the Swedish Research Council.
Since I don't see additional comments in the chat or in the Q&A box, I think I may leave it to my colleague to close out. But as I said, I'll just give a short reminder. Once I read one more question that just came in, short reminder that on May 4th, our friends and colleagues at the STARS Network will be hosting a webinar on the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, the postdoctoral fellowships, and the doctoral networks, two of the great funding schemes within these MSCA or Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. And then we as EURAXESS North America, along with other EURAXESS worldwide hubs, on June 5th and or June 6th, we'll be hosting live webinars where European host institutes will express why you should choose them. Is the host institute you have in mind when you make your MSCA postdoctoral fellowship proposal? And because the funding is coming from the EU and it's portable, it's very prestigious for these host institutes to have you because a proposal winning researcher is choosing to go to them, and they don't have to pay your salary because it comes from the EU itself. So it really is a win-win arrangement. I would encourage you to visit the STARS. I'll share a link in the follow-up email tomorrow and in the chat right now, but it is a really good funding opportunity for those looking to do some postdoctoral research. So perhaps my question is already, this question is in line with what I'm saying. What is best regarding applying for a postdoc directly to the Marie Curie Skłodowska actions or to the Swedish Research Council? And this is a great question. And maybe also for you, Dr. Renner, I'm not sure if it's an apples to apples comparison or if people traditionally apply simultaneously to both.
Yes, we have an international postdoc call in our grants, but this is only for researchers who did their PhD in Sweden, and it's an international postdoc for Swedes going abroad. So I think the Marie Curie, from coming outside, it's better to go to the Marie Curie and take the grant with you to Sweden.
But I would say that most postdoc positions you apply directly to the universities. The universities, yes. Yeah. There's faculty members who have grants and open PhD and open postdoc positions, also PhD positions. But the question was about postdoc positions. We announce openly all our postdoc positions at all universities. So you can find on the website of the universities, you can find a list of open positions, including all postdoc positions that are opened in Sweden. And then Marie Curie is of course an additional way to get a postdoc positions by applying yourself, and then you do that with a host institution and with a supervisor at a Swedish university. But most postdoc positions, I would say, you apply for directly to the universities.
Thanks for adding this, Philip. Yes. I was into the grants, but yeah, good.
If I don't see anything else, I'd invite any speaker, if you have any closing remarks you'd like to give or any additional follow-up, please do. But I don't see any more chat or Q&A questions submitted. So feel free to unmute yourselves and share some additional remarks. I'll work with all of you to get additional content for the follow-up email, make sure I have your presentations to share. I would say people in the audience can expect a follow-up email from us tomorrow. And if no one wants to say anything, I will invite my colleague, Dr. Britina Karajan, to close on behalf of EURAXESS North America.
Thank you, Jackson, for the great moderation. And thank you all for tuning in today and being with us in our first webinar of the Research in Europe webinar series. And I would also like to thank all speakers for their great support and collaboration. So today we hosted Embassy of Sweden in Washington, D.C., SIREUS, Swedish Research Council, Young Academy of Sweden, And as Jackson mentioned, this webinar will be available on EURAXESS North America website and on this YouTube channel. We will share the websites and all the information that our speakers mentioned today. It will be in our follow-up email within maximum 2 days. And we encourage you to follow us on social media and also sign up for our newsletter to be notified about our events, but also lots of opportunities for career development and research opportunities. So stay in tuned for our upcoming webinar, because we are going to explore the research opportunities and research and innovation landscape of Italy. So probably next month or in June, we are waiting for you to join us again. So I wish you a good day and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.